A coin the Australian government banned, pulled from circulation, declared completely worthless, and ordered destroyed by the millions just sold at specialist auction for thousands of dollars. And the shocking part is that hundreds of these exact same coins are sitting right now in old tins, forgotten coin jars, and dusty shoeboxes in Australian homes across the country, completely unrecognized by the people who own them. And today, we are breaking down the top 10 Australian half pennies that survived that government destruction order. Exactly what makes each one valuable. What the errors and varieties are selling for in today's specialist market, and why collectors right now are paying thousands of dollars for coins that the Australian government once told everyone were worth absolutely nothing. Let's get started with coin number 10. The 1964 Australian half penny. Let's talk about this coin, because if you've got one sitting in a drawer somewhere, you might want to take a closer look before you do anything with it. This was the very last year the Australian half penny was ever minted, and that alone makes it something special. The face value is half a penny, literally the smallest denomination that ever circulated in Australian currency history, but the story of what this coin is worth today in high-grade condition or with the right error variety is a completely different conversation altogether. In circulated condition, average examples trade for somewhere between $2 to $5, and that's fine for what it is, but we're not here to talk about average. In about uncirculated condition, you're already looking at values climbing toward the $30 to $50 range depending on the strike quality and the luster remaining on the surfaces. When you push into mint state territory, things start getting genuinely exciting. An MS62 example of the 1964 half penny has sold at Australian specialist auctions for around $120 to $150, and as you climb the Sheldon scale, the numbers move fast. MS63 examples have achieved between $200 and $280 at heritage auction houses and private treaty sales. A properly graded MS64 with full original luster and sharp strike detail on the kangaroo's legs and the portrait of Queen Elizabeth has cleared $500 at auction. And MS65 examples, which are genuinely rare in this date, have brought between $800 and $1,200 when presented through major Australian numismatic auction houses like Noble Numismatics or Downey's. Now here's where the real money lives. The error and variety market for the 1964 half penny is something that Australian collectors actively chase. The double die obverse variety on this date, where you can clearly see doubling in the lettering of Elizabeth or in the portrait details under magnification, has sold privately for between $1,500 and $2,500 when in mint state condition. The repunched date variety, where close examination reveals secondary impressions in one or more of the numerals, is another one that commands serious premiums, with confirmed sales in the $800 to $1,400 range. Broad strike errors on this date, where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar giving it a wider than normal spread, have traded hands privately between collectors for $1,000 to $1,800. A full brockage error on the 1964 half penny, which is extraordinarily rare, would be a five-figure conversation if one ever surfaced in proper auction. The 1964 date carries extra weight because it marks the end of an era. Australia was transitioning toward decimal currency, and these coins were being struck knowing the old pre-decimal system had its days numbered. The mintage figures were lower than many earlier dates in the series, and quality control toward the end of the pre-decimal era was inconsistent, which paradoxically makes fully struck gem examples harder to find than the mintage numbers alone would suggest. Collectors chasing registry set quality pieces will pay serious money for a properly attributed and graded gem example. Keep your eyes open and stay tuned, because the next coin in this series has a story that involves scarcity levels that will genuinely surprise you. Coin number 9. The 1963 Australian half penny 1 year before the series ended, and this coin carries its own set of characteristics that make it worth understanding properly if you're holding one or thinking about acquiring one. The face value is half a penny, and in average worn condition these trade for a few dollars across dealer counters and online platforms, but that's the entry point conversation, not the one that matters for serious collectors and investors paying attention to the Australian pre-decimal market. Right now, circulated examples grade dependent sit in the $5 to $15 range through fine to extremely fine, and dealers move these regularly at coin fairs and through online fixed price lists. The market is active and liquid for this date because the 1963 is recognized as a quality coin with enough collector demand to support consistent pricing. When you start looking at uncirculated examples, though, the conversation changes completely. MS-60 to MS-62 examples are bringing between $80 and $130 through auction. And the jump from MS-62 to MS-63 represents a significant quality threshold where eye appeal becomes the critical factor. A properly struck MS-63 with original skin and no distracting contact marks has sold for between $250 and $350 at specialist pre-decimal auctions in Australia. The MS-64 tier is where the 1963 halfpenny starts becoming genuinely collectible at a serious investment level. Confirmed auction results show MS-64 examples clearing between $500 and $750, with private treaty transactions reportedly reaching $900 for exceptional pieces with outstanding luster and perfectly centered strikes. MS-65 graded examples of the 1963 halfpenny are legitimately scarce, and when they surface through Noble Numismatics, Monetarium, or the major international platforms, they attract bidding that has pushed results to between $1,200 and $1,800. A single MS-66 example would rewrite the price record for this date entirely. And any knowledgeable collector knows that. The error varieties on the 1963 are specific and documented. The off-center strike variety on this date, where the design is noticeably displaced from the intended centering, is a coin that pre-decimal specialists actively seek. Depending on the degree of off-center and the grade of the example, these have changed hands between $800 and $2,000 in private transactions. The clipped planche errors, where a curved or straight clip is visible on the coin's edge, indicating a defective blank was fed through the press, are priced between $500 and $1,200 in collectible condition, depending on clip size and coin grade. Die crack varieties running through the reverse field or through the kangaroo design are documented for this date and add meaningful premiums of between 20 and 40% above standard catalog values when in high grade. The weak strike variety showing incomplete detail in the kangaroo's hindquarters and tail is a known characteristic of some 1963 production runs, and paradoxically, fully struck sharp examples from this date are sometimes harder to locate than the weak strike pieces, making gem quality sharp. Strikes worth chasing hard. The next coin we're covering has a scarcity story that puts both of these dates in perspective in a way that will completely change how you look at the whole series. Coin number 8. The 1959 Australian half-penny right in the middle of the late pre-decimal era. This coin sits at an interesting intersection of availability and collector demand that makes it one of the more actively traded dates in the entire Australian half-penny series. Face value, half a penny. Real-world value for a properly preserved example in today's specialist market. An entirely different number that Australian collectors and overseas buyers chasing pre-decimal Commonwealth material are increasingly willing to pay. Good to very fine examples of the 1959 half-penny trade regularly between $8 and $20 across the established Australian dealer network and on platforms like eBay Australia, where pre-decimal material moves constantly. Extremely fine coins, which show minimal wear and retain reasonable surface quality, sit in the $25 to $50 range and represent good entry points for collectors building date sets of the Australian half-penny series. The market for circulated examples is active, consistent, and well-established. But the uncirculated market is where the 1959 becomes genuinely interesting and where real money has been made by collectors who understood the quality premium early. MS-62 examples of the 1959 half-penny have sold at Australian specialist auctions for between $100 and $160, and MS-63 examples with strong luster and good strike have achieved between $280 and $380 at verified auction. Results. The push into MS-64 territory is significant for this date because truly well-struck, fully lustrous examples with clean fields and no detracting contact marks are harder to source than many collectors realize. MS-64 results have ranged from $600 to $900 at auction, with private sales reportedly clearing $1,000 for outstanding examples. An MS-65 of the 1959 halfpenny represents a genuinely premium collectible in the Australian pre-decimal space and has traded between $1,400 and $2,000 when properly graded and presented through reputable auction houses. The error and variety landscape for the 1959 is well documented among specialists. The double-struck error, where a second impression is applied to the coin with a rotational or linear shift, is among the most dramatic and valuable errors possible for this date. A confirmed double-struck 1959 halfpenny in collectible condition would conservatively trade between $2,000 and $4,000 in today's market, with the right buyer in the room. Rotated die errors on the 1959, where the reverse is oriented at a significant angle from the standard alignment, are documented and have sold for between $800 and $1,800 depending on degree of rotation and overall grade. Lamination errors, where the planche material peeled or split during or after striking, creating a distinctive surface defect, are known for this date and trade between $300 and $800. The filled die variety, where grease or debris blocked portions of the die, creating weakly defined or absent design elements, is another documented 1959 variety, and examples showing dramatic filled die effects on the kangaroo reverse have reached $500 to $900 privately. Now, the next coin in this lineup has production history that makes everything we've discussed so far look straightforward, and the values reflect that complexity in ways that will grab your attention immediately. Coin number 7. The 1955 Australian halfpenny mid-50s production, and a coin that represents one of the most interesting periods in Australian pre-decimal coinage history. The post-war economy was normalizing. Australia's population and commerce were expanding, and the demand for circulating coinage was strong. Face value half a penny, and that halfpenny in the mid-50s bought something real. Today, that same coin in the right condition buys something considerably more substantial for collectors who know what they're looking at. Fine to very fine examples of the 1955 halfpenny are mainstream collectibles trading between $10 and $25 through the established dealer market. Extremely fine examples with sharp detail and clean fields but showing light circulation are priced between $30 and $60. And these represent the bread and butter of the Australian pre-decimal trading market at coin shows and specialist dealer shops around the country. The transition from circulated to uncirculated is where the market starts telling you something important about relative scarcity. Because fully uncirculated examples of the 1955 halfpenny with original mint luster intact are genuinely less common than the circulated population would suggest. MS-62 auction results for the 1955 halfpenny sit in the $120 to $180 range, reflecting healthy collector demand for the date. MS-63 examples have achieved between $290 and $400 at verified Australian specialist auction results, and the step to MS-64 brings you into territory where the 1955 starts performing as a serious collectible. MS-64 results range from $700 to $1,050, and the spread between individual examples at this grade reflects how sensitive the market is to factors like strike sharpness, luster quality, and the absence of bag marks in prime focal areas. MS-65 examples of the 1955 halfpenny are legitimately rare coins by any pre-decimal standard and have traded between $1,600 and $2,400 when they have surfaced through Noble Numismatics and other specialist pre-decimal auction venues. Error varieties for the 1955 add another dimension entirely. The wrong planche error, where a halfpenny die impression was applied to a planche intended for another denomination, is the holy grail of Australian pre-decimal error coinage, and any confirmed example from 1955 production would command 5 figures at specialist auction without question. More commonly encountered errors from this date include the misaligned die variety, where the obverse and reverse centers are noticeably offset from each other, creating an uneven border width that's visible to the naked eye. These have sold privately for between $500 and $1,200. Cut errors, where a piece of the die broke away leaving a raised blob of metal on the coin's surface, are dramatic and collectible varieties from the 1955 production run with documented sales between $400 and $900 depending on cud size and location. Die polish lines showing as fine raised streaks across fields or through design elements are known for 1955, and while more common than the dramatic errors, still add a meaningful premium of 15 to 30% above standard values in mint state. Stay with us because the next coin has a date significance that makes it one of the most emotionally resonant pieces in the entire Australian pre-decimal series, and the collector demand that comes with that emotion drives values to places that genuinely surprise people. Coin number 6. The 1954. Australian half penny. This is a coin with a story attached to it that every Australian numismatist knows. And that story drives a layer of collector demand that goes well beyond pure date scarcity or mintage numbers alone. 1954 was the year of the royal tour, the first visit by a reigning monarch to Australian shores. And Queen Elizabeth II, whose portrait appears on the obverse of this very coin, was in Australia while these coins were being struck and circulated. That historical context makes the 1954 halfpenny something that crossover collectors, royal memorabilia collectors, and mainstream Australian history enthusiasts all want to own. And that multi-audience demand is a powerful force in the market. Circulated examples of the 1954 halfpenny trade actively between $10 and $30 across the fine to extremely fine grade range, with the Royal Tour Association giving even circulated pieces a slight premium over purely date-equivalent coins from surrounding years. Uncirculated examples with original luster are the pieces that serious collectors pursue, and the auction record for this date tells an interesting story about consistent upward movement over the past decade of pre-decimal specialist sales. MS-62 examples have cleared between $130 and $200 at auction, and MS-63 coins with strong original surfaces and good strike have achieved between $320 and $450 at verified auction results through Australian specialist houses. The MS-64 tier for the 1954 halfpenny is where the Royal Tour premium becomes genuinely measurable in dollar terms. Confirmed MS-64 results range from $850 to $1,200. And the combination of high technical grade plus the historical narrative surrounding the coin creates a powerful value proposition that attracts both pure numismatists and collector investors. MS-65 examples have traded between $1,800 and $2,600 in documented auction results. And a registry-quality MS-66 example would be a landmark sale for Australian pre-decimal coinage with a value that specialists would conservatively estimate at $4,000 or above in the current market. The error and variety story for 1954 adds further dimensions. The proof-like example struck from specially prepared dies showing mirror-like fields and frosted design elements is a documented characteristic of some 1954 production. And these proof-like mint-state pieces carry premiums of 50 to 100% above standard uncirculated values, translating to private sale prices between $1,500 and $3,000 for exceptional examples. Struck through grease errors showing weakness in specific design areas are known for this date, and dramatically affected examples where the grease strike-through covers significant portions of the kangaroo reverse have sold for between $400 and $800. The thin planche variety, where the coin was struck on a planche below standard specification weight, is documented for 1954 and trades between $600 and $1,000 in collectible condition. The next coin we're covering predates the Royal Tour years and enters a period of production history where mintage dynamics and historical context combine to create one of the most genuinely sought-after dates in the entire series. Coin number 5. The 1951 Australian halfpenny early 50s. Production, post-war Australia rebuilding and expanding, and a coin that sits in a particularly interesting position within the pre-decimal series from both a production standpoint and a collector demand perspective. The face value is half a penny, and that half penny in 1951 Australia was still genuinely useful in everyday commerce in ways that are hard to imagine from a modern perspective. Today, the coin's numismatic value tells a completely different story than its face value ever could. Circulated examples of the 1951 halfpenny trade between $12 and $35 in the fine to extremely fine range, with the date commanding solid recognition among Australian pre-decimal collectors who understand where it sits in the relative scarcity hierarchy of the series. Extremely fine examples with sharp detail retention are the preferred grade point for type collectors who want a representative example of this period without paying the full uncirculated premium. And these move consistently through dealer channels and at coin shows for $30 to $55 depending on strike quality and surface preservation. Uncirculated examples of the 1951 halfpenny carry the kind of premiums that reflect genuine collector competition for quality pieces. MS-62 auction results have ranged from $150 to $220, and MS-63 coins with strong original mint luster and well-defined kangaroo detail have achieved between $350 and $500 at specialist pre-decimal auctions. The MS-64 grade is a meaningful threshold for this date because fully struck, fully lustrous examples with minimal contact marking are genuinely difficult to source, and auction competition for these pieces has pushed confirmed results to between $900 and $1,300. MS-65 examples are rare in any meaningful sense of that word and have traded between $2,000 and $3,000 in the specialist market, with one privately reported transaction achieving $3,500 for an exceptional coin presented with independent grading. Service certification. Error and variety collecting for the 1951 halfpenny is a specialized pursuit with documented rewards. The double die variety on the 1951, showing clear doubling in the Australia legend or in the kangaroo design elements, is one that specialist pre-decimal variety collectors actively seek and have paid between $1,200 and $2,200 for in mint state condition. Die cap errors from this production period, where a coin sticks to the die and is used to strike subsequent coins, creating a characteristic brockage impression, are extraordinarily rare, and any confirmed die cap error from 1951 halfpenny production would represent a five-figure value proposition. At specialist auction, off-metal errors where the wrong alloy planche entered the press are another category where 1951 examples would command extraordinary premiums if confirmed and certified. More commonly traded varieties include the repunched mint mark, which for the 1951 carries premiums between $300 and $600 above standard values in mint state, and the die clash variety where design elements from one die are transferred to the other through a clash strike, creating ghost images visible in the coin's fields. Die clash examples from 1951 in mint state have sold privately for $500 to $900. Coming up next is a date that carries a specific scarcity reputation among pre-decimal specialists that has driven consistent premium pricing for decades and continues to attract serious collector attention today. Coin number 4. The 1949 Australian halfpenny late 40s production in post-war. Australia, and a coin that carries specific characteristics in the pre-decimal series that every serious Australian coin collector should understand. 1949 sits in a cluster of years where mintage figures and survival rates in high grade combine to create a supply and demand dynamic that consistently rewards collectors who acquired quality examples early and dealers who understood the date's relative importance within the full series context. Find a very fine examples trade between $15 and $40 through established channels, and the date is recognized by most Australian dealers as a solid collectible with consistent demand. Extremely fine examples bring $35 to $65, and the market at this grade level is active because many collectors building pre-decimal date sets are working in the circulated grade range where the 1949 represents achievable quality without extraordinary expense. Uncirculated examples represent a completely different market proposition. MS-62 auction results for the 1949 halfpenny range from $160 to $240. Reflecting the date's recognition as a quality collectible in the specialist community. MS-63 examples with full original luster and well-struck design detail have achieved between $400 and $550 at verified auction results. And the competitive bidding visible in the auction records reflects the genuine collector demand for quality pieces from this date. MS-64 coins are where the 1949 halfpenny starts performing at a level that justifies serious collector investment. with confirmed auction results ranging from $1,000 to $1,500 for exceptional examples with outstanding surfaces and strong strike characteristics. MS-65 pieces from 1949 are legitimately scarce and have traded between $2,200 and $3,200 in documented transactions, representing one of the stronger value propositions in the late 40s production run of the Australian Half Penny series. The error and variety market for the 1949 halfpenny reflects the broader interest in this date. The dramatic off-center strike error is particularly sought after for this date, with examples showing 25% or greater off-center displacement commanding between $1,000 and $2,000 in collectible uncirculated condition. Planche flaws, including significant lamination separations, are known for 1949 production and trade between $400 and $900 when dramatic and well-preserved. The wavy steps variety, which describes a specific die characteristic producing a distinctive appearance in the coin's flat fields, is documented for certain 1949 production and adds meaningful premiums of between $200 and $500 in mint state when properly attributed. Struck through cloth or paper errors, where foreign material between die and planchette created a distinctive textured impression on the coin's surface, are known for this production period and trade between $300 and $700 for well-defined examples. The next coin in this lineup is from a year that every Australian pre-decimal collector recognizes as significant, and the values in high-grade and error variety territory reflect that significance in numbers that demand attention. Coin number 3. The 1948 Australian Half Penny 1948. And Australia is 3 years out of the Second World War, the economy is recovering, servicemen are home and rebuilding their lives, and the mint is producing coinage to service a nation getting back on its feet. The face value is half a penny, and coins from this production year circulated heavily through a busy post-war economy, which means that genuinely uncirculated examples with original mint surfaces are significantly scarcer than the raw mintage figures would suggest. That scarcity in high grade is the story that drives value. Circulated examples in good-to-fine condition are entry-level collectibles trading between $8 and $20, and these move constantly through the established pre-decimal market. Very fine to extremely fine examples trade between $25 and $60 and represent the most actively traded grade range for this date, with consistent demand from collectors building complete date sets and from dealers who know these coins turn over reliably. The step into uncirculated territory is where the 1948 halfpenny's real character shows itself. MS-62 examples have achieved between $140 and $210 at Australian specialist auction. And MS-63 coins with the combination of strong strike and original surfaces have brought between $360 and $500 at verified auction results. The MS-64 tier for 1948 is genuinely competitive territory among pre-decimal specialists, with confirmed results ranging from $850 to $1,250 for outstanding examples. MS-65 pieces from the 1948 production run are rare by any measure and have traded between $2,000 and $2,800 in documented auction and private treaty transactions, with the upper end of this range reserved for coins that present with exceptional eye appeal and provenance from established collections. Error collecting on the 1948 halfpenny is a pursuit that rewards patient and knowledgeable collectors. The mule error, where dies from different denominations or different dates were paired incorrectly, is the most dramatic possible error for any Australian pre-decimal coin, and a confirmed 1948 halfpenny mule would represent a landmark discovery worth well into 5 figures at specialist auction. More accessible but still premium varieties include the brockage error, where a previously struck coin adhered to the die and impressed its mirror image onto a subsequent coin, with confirmed 1948 brockage examples trading between $2,000 and $4,000 depending on completeness and grade. Die adjustment strike errors, where the press was being set up and produced coins of reduced relief due to insufficient striking pressure, are known for this production period and trade between $300 and $600 for well-defined examples. Collar break errors creating a distinctive flan with a raised fin of metal at the edge are documented for 1948 and bring between $400 and $800 in collectible condition. The next coin coming up is from a year that carries specific weight in the Australian pre-decimal narrative, for reasons that go beyond numismatics into the broader sweep of Australian history. And the collector demand that historical dimension generates is very real and measurable in today's market values. Coin number 2. The 1947 Australian half penny, immediately post-war production and a coin struck in a year of profound transition for Australia and for the British Commonwealth more broadly. 1947 was the year India and Pakistan gained independence, the year the old imperial world was visibly reshaping itself. And the coins produced in Australian mints that year were entering circulation at a moment when the nature of empire and commonwealth was changing in ways that would eventually lead to the very redesign of Australian coinage. That historical backdrop resonates with a specific collector audience and adds a dimension to this coin's appeal that goes beyond pure numismatic metrics. Fine to very fine circulated examples of the 1947 half-penny trade between $10 and $28 through the established dealer market, and the date is well recognized as a solid pre-decimal collectible with reliable demand across the collector base. Extremely fine examples are priced between $30 and $65, and dealers who stock quality circulated pre-decimal material find this date turns over consistently. The uncirculated market is where the 1947 begins to separate itself from some surrounding dates in terms of relative scarcity and collector competition. MS62 examples have achieved between $150 and $230 at auction, and MS63 coins with full cartwheel luster and sharp peripheral detail have sold for between $380 and $520 at specialist pre-decimal auctions. MS64 examples represent the kind of quality that serious registry collectors and investment-focused buyers are actively pursuing, and confirmed results for exceptional MS64 specimens range from $900 to $1,300. MS65 pieces from 1947 production are rare collectibles that have achieved between $2,100 and $3,000 in documented transactions, with individual pieces at the top of this range presenting with exceptional originality and no signs of cleaning, retoning, or artificial enhancement that would compromise their appeal to sophisticated buyers. The variety and error landscape for the 1947 half-penny includes several documented categories of interest. The double-die reverse variety, showing doubling in the kangaroo design and surrounding text visible under magnification, is one of the more actively traded varieties from this production year, with confirmed sales ranging from $1,000 and $1,800 in mint state. Condition: significant rim cuds on the 1947, where die breaks at the rim produced raised metal growths that are immediately visible, are cataloged varieties trading between $500 and $1,000 depending on cud size and affected area. Struck through grease errors with dramatic effect across the kangaroo design have traded privately for between $300 and $500 for well-documented examples. The transitional die variety connecting 1947 to subsequent year production characteristics is a specialist attribution that pre-decimal variety collectors pay premiums of between $200 and $400 in mint state above standard values when properly documented and confirmed. The next coin we're covering is from a year that has a production story and a survival story in high grade that makes it one of the genuinely important dates in the entire Australian half-penny series, with values to match. Coin number 1. The 1943 Australian half-penny wartime production. Australia in 1943 was a nation fully committed to the Pacific War, with manufacturing resources directed toward the war effort and civilian production operating under the constraints and pressures of a country fighting for its existence and the existence of the free world. Coins struck in 1943 entered circulation in wartime Australia and were handled by people living through one of the most intense periods in the nation's history. That wartime provenance is something that resonates deeply with Australian collectors and with collectors of wartime Commonwealth coinage internationally. And the demand it generates is reflected consistently in auction results for quality examples. The wartime production context also means something important for the survival of high-grade examples. Coins struck during wartime circulated heavily, were saved less frequently, and were less likely to be set aside by the careful hobbyist collector whose actions preserve high-grade coins for future generations. This translates directly to meaningful scarcity in the upper mint state grades, and that scarcity is priced accordingly in today's market. Circulated examples of the 1943 halfpenny in good-to-fine condition trade between $12 and $30, with the wartime date creating a slight premium over comparable coins from non-wartime years at equivalent circulated grades. Very fine to extremely fine examples are priced between $35 and $70 through established dealers and at specialist coin shows. And these represent solid acquisitions for date-set collectors building comprehensive Australian pre-decimal collections. The uncirculated market for this wartime date is genuinely compelling. MS62 auction results for the 1943 halfpenny range from $160 to $250. And MS63 examples with strong wartime strike characteristics and original surfaces have achieved between $420 and $580 at verified. Specialist auction results in Australia. The MS64 grade is where the wartime scarcity premium becomes most visible in dollar terms, with confirmed auction results ranging from $1,000 to $1,400 for exceptional examples, with outstanding luster, sharp strike, and clean fields. MS65 pieces from 1943 wartime production are genuinely rare coins in the Australian pre-decimal context and have traded between $2,300 and $3,500 in documented auction and private treaty transactions, with the strongest results achieved when the coins are accompanied by certification from a recognized grading service and presented through a specialist pre-decimal auction with appropriate catalog description highlighting the wartime provenance. The error and variety landscape for the 1943 halfpenny reflects both the production conditions of wartime minting and the specific interest that wartime dates attract among variety collectors. The 1943/2 variety, where examination reveals the underlying ghost of a different digit beneath the final numeral of the date, is one of the most dramatic and discussed varieties in the entire Australian halfpenny series. Confirmed examples of the 1943/2 variety have sold for between $2,000 and $3,500 in mint state condition through specialist pre-decimal auctions, and the variety has been the subject of significant specialist literature that reinforces its importance and value. Thin planchy varieties from wartime production, reflecting the materials constraints of the wartime minting environment, are documented for 1943 and trade between $500 and $1,000 for confirmed and collectible examples. Wartime die deterioration varieties showing progressive cracking and failure in the working dies are characteristic of 1943 production, where die replacement may have been delayed due to resource constraints, and coins showing dramatic die crack networks across the fields and through design. Elements are collectible varieties trading between $300 and $700 when the die failure is dramatic and well documented. The misaligned die variety for 1943, showing noticeable offset between obverse and reverse centering, has sold privately for between $400 and $800 for well-centered examples with dramatic misalignment. If you've been watching this series, you now understand that the Australian halfpenny isn't just a small brown coin from your grandparents' era. It's a series with documented values, real auction history, and specific varieties that serious collectors and investors are paying serious money to acquire in the right grade and attribution. And knowing what you're holding is the first step toward understanding what it's really worth. Thanks for watching and happy collecting.